Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you all and sit in this lovely center. And the thing I've enjoyed most so far, aside from the sunset when we were coming in, which was beautiful, is this floor is great to walk on during Kinhin. It just has so much variation, and it's just so cool and feels so good against your feet. And I really appreciated that. Thank you. So I thought it might be fun to just start with one story from my book, One Bird, One Stone, and then we'll get to the meat of our talk. But this is an amusing, I found it amusing, story about D.T. Suzuki, who many of you may remember as one of the first people to write books in English about Zen. He was a deep Zen practitioner and scholar, Japanese. And he was over here in the 50s giving talks on Zen, and really the early days of getting Zen started in the West. And this story has to do with a World Congress of Faiths, which happened at the Queen's Hall in London in the late 50s. Now, I always want to preface this by saying, can you imagine what a stuffy presentation that must have been at the Queen's Hall in London in the late 50s. It would have been all white men experts with, ties and holding forth, and I'm an expert and all that sort of thing. But they invited D.T. Suzuki as well as one of the few non-Western teachers to be at this conference. And the theme of the conference was the supreme spiritual ideal. Now, so I'll just read, it's like a paragraph-long story. After listening to various other dignitaries hold forth on the subject, it was D.T. Suzuki's turn to take the platform. How can a humble person such as I talk about such a grand thing as the supreme spiritual ideal, he began. Really, I do not know what spiritual is, what ideal is, or what the supreme spiritual ideal means. With that, he proceeded to spend the rest of his speech on a description of his house and garden in Japan and how life there differed from life in a big city. The audience gave him a standing ovation. So, our subject tonight is a updated, simplified version of one of the elements of Buddhist psychology, which you may have heard of before, the Five Skandas or five aggregates. It comes up a lot from time to time in Dharma talks. It's from the original Buddhist teachings more than 2,000 years ago. It's a compendium it's from the Abhidharma, which is a compendium of Buddhist psychology. And if anybody's looked into the Five Skandas and tried to understand and put it into practice, well, how many people have looked into the Five Skandas? It's kind of a really prominent part of the Abhidharma. And how many people have looked into it and found it kind of difficult to put into practice, perhaps philosophically interesting, but what do you do with it? So Bernie Glassman, who is the one of, how many people know Bernie Glassman? Okay, no, Bernie Glassman, okay. He was the first person to receive Dharma transmission in my Zen lineage. I think he might have been the second American or one of the really early Americans to be sanctioned as a Zen teacher. And when I was getting my master's degree at Naropa Institute, he was on the board there and he would come and visit. And Naropa is fundamentally a Tibetan Buddhist influenced organization. So there were not that many people interested in Zen there. And of course, Bernie was a Zen teacher. And so there was a small group of us when he came for board meetings. He'd make up little seminars for us and such. And one of the seminars he made, which might have been like a 4-week program or something, was this version of the Five Skandas, which I've come to call the 5 conditions. partly because that's one of the names for it from the Heart Sutra. I don't know what version of the Heart Sutra you know here. But also because I teach university students, and if you call anything something like the 5 aggregates or 5 skandhas, it scares them off. The 5 conditions sounds more friendly. Also, it has to do with our conditioning. And this particular version, if you know anything about Bernie, he was very mercurial. He would, in fact, I think at Naropa was the only time he ever presented this version. I've talked to he's passed away now, so I've talked to his wife and said, did you ever hear Bernie talk about this version of the 5 skandhas that he developed? And she said, oh no, they'd been married for 20 years or something, and he never did seminars on it or anything. He just moved on to other stuff. He was leading street retreats at Auschwitz and things, intense stuff like that. Natalie went to one of the Auschwitz retreats, I know. So I was kind of, as far as I know, I'm the only person who kind of inherited this version of the 5 skandhas, but I found it so useful. I've been teaching university students meditation for credit at UNM Taos for, must be going on 20 years. And I used to think this is esoteric, save it for the end, and then I saw people were able to put it into practice. People who get it can put it into practice quite quickly. And one of the main things I'm trying to teach students in a semester of meditation, which may be all they ever get, is how to distinguish between our direct experience of reality and the stories and projections we add to it, right? Which is our main, kind of our main deal in Zazen practice, isn't it? What suffering is inescapable, like if I drop this computer on my foot, it's going to hurt. Can't escape that. But what we can do something about is the suffering that gets added on suffering because of the way we think about things, right? Yeah. You know, adding to it, what an idiot I was to drop the computer on my foot. How many things have I dropped on my foot in the past? How many things will I drop on my feet in the future? You know, all that sort of thing. And we can worry for weeks about one event, right? Or more than weeks, right? We all know the phenomenon. So I just found that, Bernie developed kind of the core of this, and I've developed it a little bit further, and I just want to share it with you because it's so, we all know that we work with the difference between what's in our heads and what's actual reality as close as we get to it, right? But this just tends to clarify it for people. So, let me ask you all, and also you online can answer too. What is our direct experience of reality as close as we get? How do we know reality's happening? This moment's the only reality, right? The past used to be reality, but it isn't anymore. The future might not happen at all. We might all keel over right now and not have any future, but we're all thinking about what we're going to do later, right? This happens to people, right? They're all thinking about what they're going to do tomorrow and next week and et cetera, and it doesn't happen. So future's completely imaginary, really. The past is maybe a little more real, but it's not as real as this, right? So, so I tell my meditation students at the university that we're doing the practice of reality. We bring our attention to this moment. So in actuality, in truth, in actual reality, we are spending our entire lives together because our entire lives are only here at this moment, right? So I'm spending my whole life with you all. And you're really nice people to spend my whole life with, really. So I'd rather spend it with you all than who knows who else. But we can't even think that way because then we're out of the moment, right? There's no other moment. This is it. So how do we know this moment's happening? Our direct experience of reality as close as we get. Can someone say?
The mind.
What aspect of the mind? What comes into the mind? What comes into the mind that tells us, here I am, experiencing?
Awareness.
Okay, what comes into awareness telling us? Natalie?
My feet are cold.
Yeah, her feet are cold. It's the senses, right? The senses tell us this moment's happening. Of course, our senses are conditioned already. You're right, the senses come into the mind, but that's part of what we're looking at, how it comes into the mind and triggers all sorts of other stuff. So reality is pretty simple most of the time. Every once in a while, something really awful happens. Nobody denies that. But most moments are like this. I don't know about you, but this moment seems pretty good to me. You know, if we don't, oh, here's another question. I just taught my first university class for the semester today, so all this is really fresh in my mind, how I introduced to them. What creatures share the earth with us who live in the moment all the time and therefore seem, when their basic needs are taken care of, they're not hungry or hurting, seem pretty satisfied with their lives? What creatures? Dogs. What else?
Birds.
Birds. What else?
Bobcats.
Bobcats. Can somebody even take it broader? Make all of them, right? Everything except human beings above a certain age know how to live in the moment and be satisfied with their lives, right? So we have this wonderful tool of the brain which can model reality, and it's a very useful tool for certain things, like building a zendo, right? You have to remember from the past how things are built, or learn from the past how things are built. You need to project it into the future. It's not going to come out exactly the way you project it, but it'll get built, and pretty nice result. That's what the thinking mind is, linear thinking mind is good for, right? But it's not good for things like the meaning of life or love. The really important, certain really important aspects of our life. My joke always is that as brilliant as Einstein was, when his wife was upset with him, he couldn't say E = mc squared, honey. No, it's not going to go over, right? It doesn't, that brilliant mind, that's the mind, that aspect of mind cured smallpox. Is that amazing? We don't have smallpox active in the world today. That's an incredible thing that the linear thinking mind can do. But how many people have ever lain awake at night worrying over a relationship and just the mind's going like this, right? And how many people have ever done that for hours and hours? Okay, how many people solved your problem that way? Right? It's the wrong tool for the job. It's like getting a flat tire and you pull over and you look in your trunk and all you've got is a screwdriver. Wrong tool. It's not going to help you, right? You can't take a flat tire off of your car with a screwdriver. If you need a screwdriver, great tool. But so that linear part of the thinking mind is great for framing reality and doing things with it. But it's not the same as reality itself. So these 5 Skandas or 5 conditions is presented as 5 steps. It's not exactly linear, which I'll say more about later. So this system says that on top of our direct experience of reality, our first response to what comes in is, in Buddhism, it's said that we react to everything. This is called the feeling level, although it doesn't mean big emotion. It means, do we like it, do we not like it, or do we have a neutral reaction to it? This model says that every single thing that comes in through our senses has some influence on, you could think of it more like our mood, what it's like to feel like Natalie right now, right, or Sean, or I don't know the rest of your, or Valerie. It's changing moment to moment the way it feels to be here. And that's always being conditioned by what comes in through the senses. I can't really give the demonstration. I sometimes, oh no, the bell's too big. Would you ring the bell?
Yeah.
Just once. So what actually just happened in reality? Just reality.
Bell rang.
Yeah, we are actually even prior to knowing it's a bell. There's sound, right? We experience sound. What this system says is immediately upon the sound, we'll have that reaction of like, dislike, or neutrality. How many people like the sound of the bell? Okay. How many people, don't, not one way or the other? Okay. All right. Anybody hate the sound of the bell? Okay. When I'm demonstrating this at the university, I'll bring a little bell. And then my second thing, I'm not going to ask you to do this, but I'll just crash it, and everybody jumps. And I say, okay, who liked that? Sometimes somebody liked it, But isn't it funny? We know instantly whether we like or don't like something. We don't even know how we know it, but we know it, don't we? So based upon whether we like something or don't like something, we'll react to it. You know what? I'm going to do something startling. Okay, I'm just going to warn you. All right? Okay. Ah! Okay. All right. How many people like that? Okay. Some people are going to like it. They're going to think it's funny, right? How many people didn't like it? How many people kind of didn't care one way or the other? Okay, great. So, so the third level is called reaction, or we want to move towards response, but the first thing is reaction. So you heard it, you didn't like it, and how many people kind of jumped even though you knew it was coming? Okay, that's the reaction. So, and this all happens really fast, just like boom, 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 right? We hear something, we don't like it, and we react by jumping, tightening up the body or something. Reaction also includes more complex emotion. How many people, when you heard me shout, even though you knew it was coming, felt a little bit pissed off that I would do that? How many people? Come on, admit it. Nobody? All right. Nobody minds? Were you pissed off, Natalie?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. Natalie was a little pissed off. Okay, so complex emotion like anger or irritation, Did anybody startle and feel a little afraid for a moment? Yeah. Okay, so that's a fear response. Did anybody no, you probably didn't love me for doing it. But anyway, all those complex emotions come under reaction, right? That's just 3 of the 5 steps. We're almost there. Okay, so the 4th step is recognition. That's where the mind catches up to what happens. So when I make a big shout like that, if you looked really closely, you would see that sound came into our awareness. We liked it or didn't like it. We responded or reacted based upon that. We probably jumped, tightened up, got a little angry, got a little fearful, Sometimes the reaction can be really mild. And then the mind registers what happened. Oh, I see why he did that, right? I see what he's doing, yeah. Or, boy, he's a jerk. He's an asshole. Why did he do that? Why do these Zen people always have to, do shocking things, So, anybody think that? Did anyone think that? You're allowed to. No, okay. Okay, and then the 5th level is the story. So that's where we download everything we know about sounds, about Zen, about people like me, about irritating people like me who do things like that, And what tends to happen is the story will wash over reality, right? In this case, it's not going to go very far. You're all practitioners. You understand what we're doing. But that's just to introduce it. Now, let's choose another example. How many people have ever had somebody look at you in a funny way and you thought they didn't like you? Or you'd done something wrong? It's universal, isn't it? This happens to everyone. How many people later found out that it wasn't true that the person didn't like you or you did something wrong? Okay, and maybe it might even be something bad happened to them that had nothing to do with you. Or maybe, how many people found out that they really did like you, but they were just shy around you in their heart? Yeah, right. This is a really common thing, too. So here's a good example of how the story gets crossed with reality. So for an example, somebody looks at you funny. What's your name?
Sophia.
Sophia? Okay, Sophia looks at you funny. Okay, she's giving me a funny look right now. Okay, when Sophia looks at you funny when you're coming into the Zendo, do you like it? Do you tend to like it or not like it, or not care? Not like it. No. Yeah, we tend to not like it when somebody gives us a certain look. Although if we're practitioners, it might not affect us at all, right? We hope it won't affect us. That's the way it is for me. 36 years of practice, this is the result it's had. If Sophia looks at me funny, it won't bother me. Okay, so. You don't
know Sophia.
No, I don't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Maybe it bothers me just a little bit. Yeah, it bothers me a little bit. So, no, it's natural. It's just a natural reaction, right? Somebody looks at you in a certain way you don't understand. We're like, ooh, what did I do, right? Okay, but let's think about how it works through the 5 conditions, how this chain works. So what do you suppose happens when somebody passes you and they look at you funny and you don't like it? What's your reaction likely to be? Remember, this reaction's prior to thought, so we're not thinking about it. So, yeah, we don't like it. That's the second level. But the reaction level is the third level. So how do you suppose we react? We might make a grumpy face ourselves, or what do we, there's kind of a classic thing we do. They walk past us, we're walking this way, they give us a funny look. What do you do?
What's your problem?
Yeah, well, that's when we get to thought, right? Okay, but we look over our shoulder like, you're right, with a funny face, like, ooh, and we might tense up a little bit maybe, and remember, complex emotion comes here. So what kind of emotion might we feel when Sophia looks at us funny?
Anger.
We might be a little irritated.
Aggression.
We might be aggressive. We might be a little bit like fearful that we've done something. We might be insecure. We might feel insecurity, right? All these things. All of this is perfectly normal. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of it but we can start to learn to interrupt some of these things so we don't end up thinking she doesn't like us when she actually has nothing to do with us, right? So the mind catches up to what just happened. So she looks at us, we don't like it. Look over your shoulder, have a little bit of emotion. And the mind will go, just what you said. It's the recognition stage might have a little bit of a few words to it, just like, not always, but it might just register. It's like, it would be something like, what's her problem would be classic, or what a jerk, she didn't even look at me, sorry. And then downloads the story, right? And then next thing you know, what happened in actuality before the story? What actually happened? Before our response to it, before liking it or not liking it, before our reaction, what's in reality, what happened?
We perceived a look.
We just perceived a look from this person, right? That's all that happened, okay? But everybody raised their hand when I said, who's been through this and thought that meant we'd done something wrong or they didn't like us? That's the story part, right? So simple, universal experience, right? This is a very simple example, but it can complicate and complicate and complicate in ways we won't necessarily have time to get into thoroughly here. But there are many more complex scenarios that this plays out all the time. Buddhism says this is playing out for us all the time, all day long. If you look into the original 5 skandhas, that 5th level is called consciousness. I don't use that because we have all sorts of associations with that term. It just means ordinary human consciousness, which means us walking around projecting things on reality, right? We tend to think it means higher consciousness or something big or highfalutin, right? Ooh, this is good. Okay, what's happening in reality?
Sound.
How many people like it? How many people don't like it? How many people don't care? Okay, right. So how many people felt a little bit irritated that sound came in? I felt a little irritated. Here I am giving a talk and the freaking sound comes on. No, not really, but you know what I mean? We might just have just a faint trace of a reaction to it, right? The mind catches up, oh, I don't even know what it is still. Is it that speaker? Is it some sort of circulation? I don't know. And then, let's just have fun with it. If you make up a story about it, make up a story about
It's
it.
a truck.
It's a truck, okay? These trucks, and let's make up a big story about the truck.
They're delivering gasoline.
Oh, yeah, let's make up a story. Let's build gasoline on top of the story.
The environment.
The environment's being ruined by gasoline, right? We're all going to die. Okay, whatever. That's, that's an exaggeration, of course, but this happens. I notice it happening to me when we get in because this happens to everyone. We just try and learn to catch ourselves. This is called mindfulness of mind, or mindfulness of mind and heart. This way of working. There's other dimensions to it as well, but this way of working with our own minds. For instance, I get caught in a traffic jam in Taos, and we have little traffic jams. They last about a minute, but they're right around the plaza area. And I'll look around, and there'll be 30 vehicles, and there are all these giant monster trucks, right? I'm in a little car, but everyone's got these giant trucks, and they're all, sometimes you can see the exhaust, right? They're all pumping out exhaust, and there's one person in each of them. So I see that. I don't like it. I get a little bit angry, because of what I'm seeing makes me a little bit angry because I haven't even got to thinking it's so wasteful. That's the mind of recognition comes up and goes, oh, this is so wasteful. And then next thing, I just go through what we just did in imagination. It's like, oh my God, look at what we're doing. This is happening all over the world. No wonder the environment's being destroyed. Global warming is coming. We're all going to die. The human race is doomed. That's where my mind will go if I don't intervene. Now, the human race is doomed. It's complete conjecture. My problem is it's very convincing, If I let myself run down that line, I could so easily go there, But the truth is we don't know if the human race is doomed. And it's not going to do me any good to feed that thought because it's going to make me depressed. Okay, it's going to make me sad and depressed, and I won't be as functional. So what happens is the story feeds back into the 5 conditions. So when I feel sad or depressed, what level of the 5 conditions is that? Anyone? 3. Thank you, Natalie. Natalie gets an A+ and a gold star. Okay, yeah, it's the reaction. It's the reaction phase. That's my emotional reaction to the situation, right? So the story will feed my emotional reaction, right? The emotional reaction will make the story worse. At first it starts with, oh, this is terrible. All these people, using fossil fuels, and this is damaging. That makes me feel a little bit sad. Then the mind wants to save me from the sadness by applying meaning to it. But the only meaning it can apply is this sucks, right? This is awful. This is awful. This is terrible. Look how wasteful we all humans are. That makes me feel more sad, more angry. That makes the story get worse, right? So there's a buildup until the whole human race is doomed and the planet's going down in flames, right? There's a bunch of steps there if I let them go. What we hope is that we can catch ourselves, be mindful of what we're thinking and feeling, and if it doesn't feel called for in that situation, and we know it's not going to be helpful, it's not about suppressing, it's just about catching ourselves, feeling the emotion. So it's not suppression. The real thing that happens is let myself feel the sadness. Don't run up here, because running up here is actually trying to get away from the sadness. How many people feel sad about the state of the world? Yeah, right. So how many people have noticed that it doesn't do us much good to dwell upon it and agonize, right? Yeah, this is what we're talking about, right? So I wonder if anybody has an example from their own life, something that perhaps one of those cycles of thought that's been preying upon us. again and again and again. Anybody never have that experience?
Oh.
Does anyone never have that experience? And at home, I'll probably need some, somebody's put something in the chat. I want to include you all, so if you know how to raise your hand or just want to raise it on the screen, there's not so many of you, I should be able to see it, or you can use the little raise hand function. Anybody got an example from their lives? One of those mind cycles that's been running? I'll make one up if we don't have one. Okay, Sophia, okay. So, yeah, sometimes I'll do like a workshop on this where we all get a chance to, bring up these things and work through them, because it seems clear when we use a simple example, but when it gets more complex, well, it gets complex. Okay, so what's going on with you, Sophia?
I don't know if this is a good example for the Dharma talk today, but I noticed that there's a pattern that I have of wanting to exceed someone's expectations of me, and there are expectations that I think they have of me. So they're not expectations that they've told me that they have of me, they're just my expectations of what I think they have of me.
Oh,
and
interesting.
how that works on a daily basis is I have investors who have obviously invested in the work that I do, and so in my mind I think they've invested in this because they believe in me, and so I must constantly be outperforming. And if I don't outperform, then I fail to meet whatever arbitrary expectations I think they have of me.
Got it.
And so that's like quite a vicious loop where instead of like in reality being able to measure the impact the work has had, I compare it to the false expectation that I've created of them,
Right.
which can be helpful in a way because it makes me like go turbo,
Right.
but it's also not living in reality.
Sure, that's great. That's a good example. It's a little bit complex, but let's just say, for the sake of looking at it through this lens, let's just say an investor's just given Sophia $1 million.
Yes, please.
Okay. So in actuality, what's happened? Let's say she meets the person. What's the reality of the situation? She receives a check or a giant stack of bills, or something comes across the internet. Something happens that signals this. Does she like it? Oh yeah, she likes it, yeah. But then when she gets into the reaction phase, what happens? Yeah, she gets fearful, right? Which is understandable. $1 million is a lot of money. If you're really scared, just give it back to me, okay? So, yeah, and then the mind starts to catch up and goes, in this case, it's a little hard to parse out, but it might be, ooh, I better be worthy of that. That might be like the first stage where the mind registers. And then comes the whole thought pattern. So here's the trick, is what do we do in Zazen when we start thinking?
We come back to our breath.
Come back to our breath. Now, the way I was trained, I don't know exactly how you train here, but the way I was trained is you see the thought, so you acknowledge it, so know it's received, and then you make the choice to come back to direct reality. Thoughts are not the same as reality, right? So if you do that 1,000 times, but you have to do it off the cushion too, right? When you catch yourself, those thoughts, that thought structure, because it's been there for a while, starts to dig a groove and it gets seductive and we get attached to it, even if it's not serving us. So we have to really kind of raise some inner oomph and go, you know what? I'm not going to live with this. Okay, it's going to happen on the cushion too, especially if I gave you the $1 million this morning, you're going to be thinking about it tonight in Zazen, right? It's going to take you, at least 24 hours to get past thinking about it, okay? So here comes the thought. And the way we treat our thoughts is like the way we would treat a child if a child came into a busy kitchen at Thanksgiving and there's knives and boiling water and stoves and hot stuff and flames. They come in and tug on your apron and they want your attention. So hopefully what you do is give the child a moment's attention and then escort it to the edge. Say, I can't do this now, I'll get back to you later. Same thing with our thoughts. Our thoughts are trying to help us. Sometimes it's misguided. But I promise you, if you, so what happens is stories are made of individual thoughts, right? Individual thoughts build up into stories. Then the stories become a kind of reality. And then if we're not careful, it becomes an identity, right? And I bet we all know people like that, you know? And the person like that is the person who's just gonna be freaked out all the time. They might do really well with the investors, but they even after a while, they stop even liking it because it's just, they're so stirred up and stressed by it, right? They end up giving it up and going to a Zen center. So I'm glad you're here.
That's not what happened, but okay.
So it becomes stressful, but so you might have to let go of that thought 1,000 times, not just on the cushion, but in your everyday life and when you receive the $1 million. And you might have to let go of that thought 1,000 times, and that's just the first week. And then the next week, you have to do it again. And then the next week, you have to do it again. But eventually, you start to gain some power. When that comes up, you go, I don't think so. This is what I do when I see that pattern start to form around the, you know. So there's some, well, I'm in a little traffic jam, and there's 20 cars with exhaust coming out. And my mind runs to the end of the human race. It's just like, okay, we're not going to go there. You know, I'm just in a little traffic jam, and I'm going to forget all about it in about a minute. And it's not useful. It's not like you're cutting it off. I know the world's in trouble, and I let some of that in, but too much of it, ooh, I'm not going to be able to do what I do. You know, I'm going to be too depressed.
I have a question, though.
Sure.
There are patterns of thinking that are clearly negative, like the climate change
Right.
leading to humanity's doomed.
Yeah.
But the one that I think modern society kind of gets trapped in, including myself, is these thoughts that are negative, but they have positive outcomes. So me thinking and fearing the expectations of an investor makes me work harder, so it makes me outperform, which makes me end up getting more funding. So it's almost like a positive vicious cycle. In
Yeah.
that case, are you still, is the objective still to interrupt that thought and become detached? Or is
Well-
it to just be like, hey, this is leading to a good outcome?
Yeah.
So
So that's a really interesting question. So if we can see a thought and turn back to our breath, or see a thought in our everyday life and just go, I'm not going there, and letting go, what does that tell us about our relationship to our thoughts? What did you say, Adrian? Okay, it's about we're attached to our thoughts. In fact, we tend, if we haven't done something to intervene, some sort of work on ourselves, we're going to think the thought's real, and we're going to think we're thinking it. But if in Zazen, one of the first things you see is, oh no, the brain's just spitting up thoughts, just the way the intestines produce poop, you know? It's, in fact, they have a lot in common, right? But we don't tend to identify with our intestines, but we tend to identify with our thoughts, right? Once we really get clear, I can't be my thoughts, or I couldn't be letting go of them. I can't, you know, that's a fundamental confusion we all tend to grow into, that attachment to thinking, I am the thinker. But the more you sit, the more you start to register that can't be, you know? So I'm the one, if anything, you know, this is a complex question, but we could start with saying I'm a kind of witnessing awareness that receives that. It receives information from my intestines. It receives, you know, information from my skin. It's just, you know, one set of information does not have to be prioritized over the other. If we really know that, we're really centered in ourselves, we can choose which patterns of thought we want to keep if they're useful, and which ones we want to dispense with because they're not useful. When something happened in 2016, I'm not going to go into politics, but my teacher and my teacher, Shishin Wick, and I had a lot of conversations about the political situation and what things were happening. And, you know, he's been practicing for going on 50 years. One can misuse practice to wall off things. You can hide in samadhi and wall off the world. But that's not its intention. That's not a proper use of it. So knowing that he could do that if he wishes, when we would talk about these things, he would say, I choose to allow myself to be upset by this because it motivates action, So you choose to allow enough upset that it motivates action, but not so much upset that it sinks our boat, right? So, and then thoughts aren't always negative. Stories aren't always negative. Some of them are positive. It's fine to keep ones like, well, this seems rough now, but I can learn something from it. I'll grow from this. I'll get stronger from this. That's an example of a good thought, a good story. Another good story is I can be mindful of this pattern. That's a good story. Keep that one, So stories can serve us, but the particular ways in which they can cause us pain is particularly what I'm hoping we can put into practice, So you decide whether you can bear the pain to get more money, in which case maybe you do. But then again, if it's stressing you out and you know it's not good for you, then maybe you should give the whole thing up and come to a Zen center. No, I'm kidding. I mean, we have to do something to earn our living, right? But when we really know we're not that thought, it starts to lose its power. And eventually it'll have very little power. But you got to stay on it. I'm not even exaggerating when I say you have to let go of it 1,000 times, and that's the first week. You have to raise some oomph. And you know what? Most people won't do it. That's kind of a challenge. Most people will live with a negative pattern that they know is a negative pattern, even if they're practitioners. And they just somehow won't raise the chutzpah to take care of it. But we don't have to live with those conditioned patterns. We didn't choose. A lot of them we didn't choose. If you're an overachiever kind of person, that probably was the case by the time you were in first grade. It was already in you. And you didn't say, hey, I'm going to take this overachiever thing and stress myself out when you're 5 years old. No, it just, society and parents and teachers and peers, all this stuff. Well, thank you for that example. There's an example here online, too. Somebody, KD, who's KD, is saying, not sure if this is helpful, but I see a roadkill on the side of the road. I'll create a story of how they suffered in the last moments of their lives. Humans are wreaking havoc on the environment and have no regard for other creatures. What can I do to make people care, or how can I protect animals from humans? Whether it is in the street, animal abuse, factory farming, game hunting. What am I supposed to do with my life? Then I want to distract myself with TV or phone games. So we find ways to distract ourselves from our stories, which in a certain sense is healthy. We all need some distraction. We all need some relief from these stories. But better than TV or the phone game. Well, do a little TV and a little phone games, but also do some zazen, right? But this is a good example of the allow yourself to be just disturbed enough that you will, at the very least, give some money to organizations that are protecting animals, at the very least, or environmental organizations. Not everybody's suited to be out in the streets, protesting. But we find out what we are suited for. Well, this is my work. All my eggs are in the consciousness basket. I feel like if humans don't raise consciousness, oh boy, we're in trouble. So meditation's the best tool we have for raising consciousness. How else do we grow consciousness? So this is where I stay motivated to serve, and I try and put the energy there, but I can't let too much of that stuff in. For KD, the thing is, if we're not going to get lost in that whole story cycle, what we have to do is bear the pain of seeing the dead animal. So the story is an attempt by the mind to protect us from the pain we would otherwise feel. The truth is, it doesn't work very well. It doesn't work very well for that purpose. It works great for designing computers and Zendos and other things, but not so much for giving, the mind's this meaning machine. What does this mean? But it can't find good meaning to a dead animal by the side of the road. And the weird thing is, if the mind can't find a good meaning, it'll apply a bad meaning. It's just like, I'm going to apply meaning. That's my job. That's what I do. So But if you let go of the thought, then you have to bear the pain. Of course, the pain's, that's the kind of pain we have to bear as human beings. It's not, as adult, mature human beings, especially if we're practitioners. Anybody in a sitting period ever have to bear some emotional pain? One of the secrets of Zazen is that's some of the training is we learn to sit through and raise our tolerance for different kinds of pain so that we can remain conscious in it. That's only part of it. It's also very pleasurable and wonderful and illuminating and other things, but that's part of it. So, and then we can start to intentionally think about things in a different way or build a different story, So we're going to run out of time in a minute, but in a few minutes. But does anybody else have a question or any questions or comments about any of this?
Could you just go over, I know the skandhas, but as you're saying, can you just name the 5
This is
things?
this is the version of it. Incidentally, I have an article I did for Tricycle Magazine a few years ago that talks about this system versus the skandha system. I don't know, Valerie, is there some way to make it available to people if I send you a copy?
Yes.
That would be great, yeah. Because it will help, because, what have we had? Less than an hour here. And it's going to be very easy to forget. So, actual reality, sensation. The first one's called sensation. The second one, I wish I could come up with something better. It's generally called feeling. But it doesn't mean emotional feeling. It means like, dislike, or neutral. Third one is reaction. If we start to become mindful, we can even start catching ourselves when we don't like what's happening and not go into the reaction. We can choose response. But if we're lost in the conditioning, it's going to be reaction, right? The fourth one we call recognition. Thank you, Natalie. Actually, I'm not sure I spelled them out like that. Recognition, that's where the mind catches up. The fifth one I call the story, just for simplicity's sake. The original skandha system, somebody just put it in the chat, that's great. If you're a Tricycle subscriber, you can get that, but I can also just send you a copy of it. So, what was he saying just before that? When you let go of thoughts, you let go of thoughts. Okay, the fifth one is called the story. Yeah, that's the one that the original skandha system is more complex. Sometimes people object because this is a simplification of it. Yeah, it's a simplification of it so we can use it, And I've started using it. I just had my first class with the university students today, as I said. I'm going to bring this up in the second class. They're going to work with it the whole semester. And the way to work with it first is to notice how many people ever have a day where nothing bad happens. We have lots of days where nothing bad happens, don't we? Nothing bad actually happens. Yeah, to ourselves. How many people have a day where you don't find a reason to suffer? Okay, if you do, then you're a solid practitioner. You have days where you don't suffer. But when we catch ourselves suffering, we can ask ourselves, did anything bad actually happen? And if not, it's coming from that conditioned mind. This is stepping aside. This is the way we work with ourselves personally. We understand that we have empathy for others, and there are always others who are suffering. But we need to keep ourselves in balance first. We weren't equipped to take the whole world's suffering onto our shoulders unless we're really advanced Tibetan practitioners doing Dhamma practice or something. We have to start by balancing our own lives, and then we can start to help others with theirs. Well, I guess we're out of time. But what a pleasure to visit with all of you. I'm not in a particular rush to get out of here, so if anybody wants to just chat for a little bit afterwards, we can. And thank you all. I've really enjoyed this time together. Okay.